Hello everybody, welcome back to Gecko Tech and Gaming. Alright, so today we're going to take a dive into the Roccat, I don't really sure how to say that. The Roccat Burst Pro Air. So, this guy was a pretty popular wired mouse, pretty lightweight, really good budget option for FPS games. A lot of people had problems with the switches, but we'll get into that later. But yeah, so they got a wireless version, finally. Feels like it's a little bit late to the party, but not unwelcome. So let's see if the Roccat Burst Pro will burst down the competition. First, the objective stuff. This mouse is a wireless version of the Burst Pro, and it feels pretty much exactly the same as the original wired Burst Pro, though it is heavier. The original wired Burst Pro was 68 grams, fairly competitive at the time, fairly lightweight for its size. This is 81 grams, so a little bit heavier. Compared to a lot of competition of similarly sized mice, it's like 5-6 grams over other comparable mice, but I do find that the weight is pretty well distributed. Doesn't feel too front or rear heavy in my opinion. It feels good in hand and swipes easy enough on a mouse pad. I really like the connectivity options that this mouse gives you. It's got the wired, of course, for charging. It also has 2.4 Hz wireless through a dongle, as well as 5.2 Bluetooth. Now, at first I thought 5.2 Bluetooth would just be kind of a gimmick. It really does feel noticeably better. Now, it's not going to be anything comparable to 2.4 Hz wireless. You're still not going to get the same speed and latency, but it is noticeably better than the Bluetooth, like a 5.1 Bluetooth on the Roccat Cone Pro Air that has the Bluetooth. It feels much less choppy, but I would still recommend you use the 2.4 Hz wireless through the dongle if you're in a more fast-paced gaming situation. I really like the side buttons on this mouse. You can see right here, they're pretty big, pretty chunky. I really like them. It's very easy to get the thumb to a point where you can roll to get the front and rear side buttons. I really like them. They feel nice. Not a whole lot of pre or post travel. These are really good side buttons. Now, I'm not sure if all the switches on this mouse are their proprietary switch, but Mouse 1 and Mouse 2, at least for sure, are their Titan optical switches. These things have a bananas lifespan of 100 million clicks, so this is a mouse for the long haul. But man, I'll be honest, I'm usually not the person who's super sensitive to bad sounding switches as long as they perform well. Like the Titan GE Air, I really like that mouse, but the switches were really cruddy. But I still can really easily give that mouse a recommendation because it functions super well. The Mouse 1 and Mouse 2 on the Roccat Burst Pro and Burst Pro Air are just really hollow, and it's super noticeable. And they feel almost kind of sluggish too. When it comes to other switches, it feels like they spring back, like there's like that kind of responsiveness. These feel, I don't know how to explain it. They don't feel as responsive in a tactile way. They do feel a little bit heavier than your average switch as well, so keep that in mind. For me, I could perform just fine, but it did feel kind of funny. If you're sensitive to that type of thing, just keep that in mind. Now, Mouse 1 and Mouse 2, there's really no side play at all on these. There's some pre-travel and just a little bit of post-travel. I have a feeling that the hollow sound of the switches, as well as the way that they feel, might be because of how it's made, because Mouse 1 and Mouse 2 are a part of the whole shell here. So you can see there's like a little notch there. It's just like one whole piece here. The scroll wheel feels very nice. It's a little light for my taste. I like a little bit more tension, but this is perfectly good. Very well-defined steps, and middle click feels nice. It does have a profile button on the bottom if you want to set up multiple profiles through their program. It's called Swarm, but it's also got a gigantic DPI button with real big bold letters saying DPI. So just in case you couldn't tell, that's what that button is for. It's for the DPI. Looks kind of chintzy in my opinion. It's kind of weird. Now, speaking of Swarm, I had a ton of issues with that program trying to get this mouse set up. People complain about Razer Synapse a lot. I've never had too many issues with Synapse, but Swarm just was being a pain in the tuchus for me. I had to get the firmware updated, but it wouldn't allow me to download any firmware. I had to restart it, still wouldn't work. I had to uninstall it point blank, restart my computer, boot it back up, and then it let me install the firmware. Now that the firmware has been updated, I haven't had any more issues with Swarm. Just my experience, you might not have that problem. It was being a real stinking pain in the butt for me. The battery life on this is pretty good. I left it at about a 50% brightness and went back and forth between the 2.4 hertz, which will take up more energy, and the Bluetooth while I was doing more productivity stuff. And I got about 5 days out of it before I had to recharge. You could probably stretch that out a lot further if you just left the lighting off. But part of the appeal of this mouse, I think, is that lighting. If you're someone that likes LED, a lot of RGB, this is a really good option. I really like the skates on this thing. It's got these PTFE feet, very big, very smooth. They say they're heat treated or whatever. All I can say is they feel great. You won't need aftermarket skates for this. And it uses what Roccat calls the owl eye sensor, which is really just a 3370. I didn't have any issues with it. Performs great. Now, this top shell and the Mouse 1 and Mouse 2, it feels like it's some kind of just raw, uncoated plastic, so it's not my favorite. It's very grippy though, and I can say, at least for the white version, I don't have the black version, so I can't say for sure. But it doesn't pick up any fingerprints, so that's a plus in my book. Now the sides are plastic as well. It does feel more coated, but there's like some kind of hexagonal glossy pattern on it. It looks pretty interesting, and I do find that it feels pretty good in hand. It gives you a little bit of grip without feeling super distracting. I really like the sides on this mouse. Overall, the Roccat Burst Pro Air feels very well built. A lot of Rockat's mice have that kind of really tanky quality to them. I do, however, notice that squeezing it, I don't get barely any creak or anything like that, and I can squeeze this sucker real hard. The only thing that does come up is if you squeeze the very side, you can actually actuate the rear side button if you squeeze hard enough on the side. But for those of you who care, that's a thing. But in real life use, like if you're gaming or whatever, there's no way you're going to do it on accident. You got to squeeze it really hard. Subjectively, I do like this shape. I prefer a mouse that's a little bit flatter, but this shape is super safe. I like that the sides are a little bit flatter. There's no big flare at the front. Using claw grip, this feels very dexterous in hand, very nimble. I've got 17.5 by 10.5 centimeter hands, and claw is really the best feeling way for me to use the Roccat Burst Pro. If you have specific taste when it comes to switch sound and switch feel, you may take issue with the Roccat Burst Pro Air. But if that doesn't bother you so much and you really like RGB, this is a pretty safe recommendation. It comes in at about $100, which compared to other mice that are out right now isn't too bad. For $100, you get a solid mouse with 100 million click lifespan. You get the 2.4 hertz as well as the Bluetooth 5.2, so you have that flexibility with your connectivity. This is a pretty solid mouse. There's, other than those switches, really I don't have any complaints. This is a solid recommendation. And with the wide connectivity options and the very safe shape, in my opinion, this is a pretty easy recommendation. This is a good crowd pleaser. Pretty much anybody could pick this up and use it without really any issue. I could very easily recommend this, especially for FPS gaming and just day-to-day use, especially if you really like that crazy RGB. All right, so that does it this time. Y'all take care. God bless. Stay safe. And I'll see you next time. Later.